She was the breakout star of the Mamas and the Papas, a woman with a voice so rich, so commanding, that it defined an entire generation. But behind the bright spotlight, behind the standing ovations, was a story far darker. Unreturned love, humiliating career failures, reckless affairs, and dangerous diets. Her struggle with her own image haunted her every day, right up until the end. Cass Elliot carried one of her greatest secrets to the grave. No one knew who the real father of her child was. Only years later did her bandmate Michelle Phillips reveal the truth, and it was the biggest shock of all. Ellen Naomi Cohen, the girl the world would come to know as Cass Elliot, was born in Baltimore in September 1941. Her parents, Russian Jewish immigrants, struggled to make ends meet. Poverty shaped her early years, but even in hardship, Cass seemed marked for greatness. She had a radiant personality, boundless talent, and a spark that lit up every room. Yet with her gift came demons. From a young age, she wrestled with her weight and with the cruel stigma that came with it. Still, she discovered her salvation in high school. Theater. Performing gave her strength. It gave her purpose. And soon, she found a name that gave her power. Cass Elliot. Cass, borrowed from actress Peggy Cass. Elliot, taken from a friend she had lost too soon. It wasn't just a stage name. It was armor. With her new identity, she set her sights on New York. Broadway was her dream. But Broadway can be merciless. One audition changed everything. She lost the role to an unknown newcomer, Barbra Streisand. Cass was crushed, and in that heartbreak, she turned to music. She hoped it would love her where theater had rejected her. She hoped it would not break her heart. But music, too, was a battlefield. Between 1962 and 1964, Cass formed two bands, the Big Three and later the Mugwumps. It was here she met Denny Doherty, the man she would love in silence for the rest of her life. He was her muse, her weakness, her obsession. But fate twisted cruelly. Though she loved Doherty, Cass married guitarist James Hendrix in 1963. There was no romance. The marriage was a practical arrangement to help him avoid the draft. Within 8 months, the band dissolved, and so did their marriage. Cass hoped Doherty would finally choose her. Instead, he joined a new group, the New Journeymen, led by John and Michelle Phillips. For Cass, it was another door slammed in her face. She wanted in. She wanted to be near Doherty. He admired her talent, but John Phillips was merciless. He dismissed her voice as too low for his songs, and in private he ridiculed her appearance. To him, Cass was simply too heavy to be part of the band. But Cass Elliot wasn't about to give up. Rejected and humiliated, Cass still refused to walk away. She followed the New Journeymen wherever they went, clinging to the hope of being accepted. But what she endured was nothing short of cruel. They treated her worse than they would have treated an annoying groupie. They barked orders at her. They had her fetch drinks. Sometimes they even let her rehearse with them, only to snatch away the chance to perform. Cass swallowed the humiliation. For her, the dream and the chance to be close to Denny was worth it. Then, everything changed. The New Journeymen were careless. They spent more on partying and substances than on their music. Eventually, the money ran out, and they had nowhere to go. Desperate, they turned to the one person who had never abandoned them, Cass Elliot. She opened her Los Angeles home to them, but she named her price. Either she joined the group, or they would be left on the street. Out of sheer desperation, John Phillips had no choice but to agree. Years later, an official story circulated, a glamorous legend to cover the truth. According to that version, Cass had been walking under a construction site in the Virgin Islands when a pipe fell on her head. The blow, they claimed, miraculously changed her voice, suddenly giving her the higher range Phillips wanted. It was a neat little story. It was also a lie. The truth was simple. Phillips had excluded her because of her weight, and he had only accepted her when he had no other option. But out of rejection and humiliation came triumph. The group renamed themselves the Mamas and the Papas. With Cass's voice leading the way, they soared to the top of the charts. California Dreamin, Monday, Monday. They became the soundtrack of an era. Cass, at last, was living her dream. But the dream came with a price. The jokes about her weight never stopped. In their hit Creek Alley, her own bandmates wrote the cruel lyric, "No one's getting fat except Mama Cass." What began as a throwaway line became her permanent nickname. The world didn't just call her Cass Elliot anymore. She was Mama Cass. And as if the ridicule weren't enough, her heart was breaking. Cass had joined the group for Denny Doherty, but Doherty had chosen someone else, Michelle Phillips. When Cass found out about their affair, she was shattered. In anguish, she confronted Michelle. "You can have any man in the world. Why take the one man I love?" Her heartbreak was unbearable. She poured it into her music and numbed it with drugs. The pain led her into scandals that followed her wherever she went. In London, she was even arrested, officially for stealing bed linens. But behind the scenes, police suspected her of being tied to a lover who was also a drug supplier. The charges were dropped, but the stain on her reputation lingered. Her time with the Mamas and the Papas was crumbling, and soon, Cass would strike out on her own. By the late 1960s, the Mamas and the Papas were coming apart. Behind the harmonies that made them famous, there were feuds, betrayals, and broken hearts. For Cass, every song carried the weight of her unspoken love for Denny Doherty and the sting of watching him in Michelle's arms. The tensions poisoned the band. John Phillips grew increasingly controlling. Michelle strayed not only with Denny but with others as well. Trust dissolved, friendships shattered, and the music could no longer hold them together. By 1968, the group that had once defined the sound of a generation was finished. For Cass, the end of the Mamas and the Papas was bittersweet. On one hand, it meant the loss of the only stage she had ever known, the family she had fought to be a part of. On the other, it gave her a chance to step out from the shadow of ridicule and finally be seen, not as Mama Cass, but as Cass Elliot. Her first solo single was a gamble. She recorded "Dream a Little Dream of Me," a song that seemed almost too gentle, too wistful for the bold, larger-than-life woman the public thought they knew. But the song was a triumph. Audiences embraced it. For once, Cass was recognized not as the butt of a cruel joke, but as the owner of a voice that could stop time. For a moment, it seemed like Cass was free. Free of the band, free of John Phillips's harsh judgment, free to reinvent herself. She dreamed of a solo career that would prove, once and for all, that she was more than just Mama Cass. But freedom came with new pressures. To stand alone, she would have to reshape not only her career, but her body. That was when the stage lights of Las Vegas came calling. Caesar's Palace offered Cass a contract, a chance to headline, to become the star she always knew she was meant to be. It was the opportunity of a lifetime. But for Cass Elliot, it would become a disaster. For Cass, the Las Vegas contract was everything she had ever dreamed of. A solo residency at Caesar's Palace, the spotlight all to herself, the chance to prove that she wasn't just the voice of the mamas and the papas. She was Cass Elliot, a star in her own right. But with that opportunity came crushing pressure. In an era obsessed with thinness, Cass believed that success meant changing her body. So she turned to a brutal crash diet. For 7 long months, she starved herself 4 days out of every week. She lost nearly a third of her weight. But what she lost in pounds, she also lost in strength. By the time she arrived in Las Vegas, Cass was gravely ill. Her voice, once warm, strong, and effortless, had been battered by tonsillitis, vocal cord hemorrhages, mononucleosis, and even hepatitis. But she pushed forward. She couldn't afford to fail. On opening night, the showroom glittered with stars. Sammy Davis Jr., Jimi Hendrix, Mia Farrow, the A-list of Hollywood and music all turned up to see Cass Elliot's big debut. The crowd buzzed with expectation. The curtain rose, and then silence. Cass appeared, nervous, frail, exhausted. She tried to sing, but her voice was weak, shaky, barely audible. She stumbled through her set, her confidence crumbling with each note. The audience, restless, disappointed, began to walk out. Her contract required her to perform twice a night. After resting backstage, Cass tried again. But the second show was even worse. By the end, Caesar's Palace had seen enough. The contract was canceled on the spot. The press was merciless. Newsweek compared her debut to the sinking of the Titanic. For Cass, the humiliation was unbearable. She had sacrificed her health, her happiness, and nearly her life for this chance, only to be laughed at, torn apart in the very city where she had hoped to be reborn. She fell into a deep depression. And yet, even in those darkest days, there was one light that kept her going. Her daughter. The Las Vegas disaster left Cass broken. The critics mocked her, the press branded her a failure, and her health was in ruins. But even in the middle of despair, there was one bright light in her life. Her daughter, Owen. Cass had given birth shortly before signing her Vegas contract, and from the moment she held the child in her arms, everything changed. No man, no career, no stage could ever matter as much as this little girl. Cass became fiercely protective. She hired and fired nannies the moment they grew too close. She kept Owen out of the headlines. She built walls of silence around her private life. But the greatest wall of all was the secret she refused to let slip: the identity of Owen's father. Not to the press, not even to her closest friends. It was a mystery she carried like a shield. Of course, the gossip industry couldn't resist. The tabloids swirled with speculation. Every man Cass had ever known became a suspect. And then, the rumors grew darker. Cass Elliot was famous for her legendary Hollywood parties. The guest lists glittered with stars, but also with shadows. Among those rumored to have entered her home was the most infamous figure of the era, Charles Manson. No one knows how close Cass truly was to Manson, or if she knew him at all beyond the haze of parties and introductions. But after the horrific Tate murders, fingers began to point in every direction. John Phillips himself even accused Cass of bringing Manson into their circle. It was a cruel, baseless charge, but the stain lingered. Through it all, Cass clung to her daughter, the one piece of her life she refused to let the world corrupt. If her career was faltering, if the world ridiculed her, she could at least be what she longed to be most: a mother. By 1971, Cass longed for stability. For years, she had chased love that never loved her back. Now, at last, she thought she had found it. His name was Donald von Wiedemann, a journalist, heir to a Bavarian title, and, for a brief moment, Cass's husband. The wedding was quiet, hopeful, almost a promise of a new life. But the promise didn't last. Within 2 months, the marriage had collapsed. Another dream, gone as quickly as it came. Cass returned to what she knew best: the stage. She made television appearances, even starred in her own specials, the Mama Cass television program, and Don't Call Me Mama anymore. But behind the camera, she kept fighting the same old battle. The crash diets continued. She punished her body, ignoring every warning sign. In 1974, the warnings grew impossible to ignore. Waiting backstage for an appearance on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, Cass suddenly collapsed. Medical staff rushed to her aid, but she brushed it off with a joke. "My blood sugar dropped, that's all. Everything's fine." It wasn't fine. That summer, she flew to London for a 2-week engagement at the Palladium. On stage, she was radiant, powerful, her voice soaring as if nothing could touch her. The shows were a triumph. For a brief moment, Cass Elliot looked unstoppable again. But off stage, her body was failing. She partied through exhaustion, Mick Jagger's birthday, endless gatherings with friends, late-night celebrations. To everyone around her, she seemed in good spirits, but her face was pale, her breathing labored. She waved it all away as fatigue. Then, on a quiet July morning in 1974, Cass didn't wake up. She was just 32 years old. The official cause was heart failure. Her body, weakened by years of punishing diets and relentless pressure, had simply given out. But the world wasn't kind, even in death. Instead of mourning her, tabloids spread a cruel myth that Mama Cass had choked on a ham sandwich, a lie that mocked her weight and overshadowed her legacy for decades. 4 years later, in a haunting twist of fate, The Who's drummer Keith Moon died in the very same London flat. He was 32 as well. Cass's daughter, Owen, was raised by her younger sister, Leah. For years, the mystery of Owen's father remained locked away, sealed by Cass's silence. Until finally, Michelle Phillips revealed the truth. It was guitarist Chuck Day. In 2022, nearly 50 years after her death, Cass Elliot was awarded a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. At last, the world honored her not with ridicule, but with remembrance. She was a woman who fought to be heard in an era that judged her body more than her voice. A woman who carried heartbreak, humiliation, and rejection, yet sang through it all with a voice so powerful that no stage could contain it. Cass Elliot, the dreamer, the fighter, the legend who left us too soon.